The tragic gay life and end of Sherman Hemsley. What if I told you the man who made America laugh for decades was living a secret life of silence, loneliness, and scandal? Sherman Hemsley, the unforgettable George Jefferson, wasn't just hiding behind sharp jokes and struts. He was guarding truths that Hollywood never wanted exposed. From whispers of forbidden love to the shocking legal war that kept his body unburied for months, his final chapter is as heartbreaking as it is shocking. Was he a victim of fame or of secrecy itself? Stay tuned, because this story will change the way you see him forever, only here on Legends of Black Excellence. Sherman Hemsley. Sherman Alexander Hemsley, born February 1, 1938 in South Philadelphia, was the product of grit, resilience, and quiet ambition. Raised by his single mother, Arsenia, after his father abandoned the family, he grew up in a working-class neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, but determination was essential. From an early age, Hemsley found joy in performance, dazzling teachers with his comedic timing in school plays. Still, survival came first. After graduating high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, where he served 4 years, gaining the discipline and work ethic that would later fuel his relentless pursuit of acting. Upon returning, he secured a steady job as a postal clerk, but spent his nights in acting classes and small theater productions, grinding through exhaustion with the conviction that one day the spotlight would find him. That belief paid off in the 1960s when he joined New York's Negro Ensemble Company, a trailblazing theater group giving voice to black actors at a time when roles were painfully limited. It was there that television pioneer Norman Lear spotted him in the Broadway musical Purlie. So impressed was Lear that he created the character of George Jefferson with Hemsley in mind. By 1971, Sherman was introduced as Archie Bunker's brash neighbor in All in the Family, and by 1975, he headlined his own sitcom, The Jeffersons. The show ran for 11 groundbreaking seasons, portraying a successful black family moving on up to Manhattan's Upper East Side. His portrayal of George Jefferson, arrogant, fiery, but lovable, earned him a Primetime Emmy nomination and cemented him as a household name. Later in Amen 1986 to 1991, he charmed audiences again as Deacon Ernest Fry. Yet behind the laughter, Sherman lived in near-total privacy. Unlike his loud-mouthed characters, he was soft-spoken, shy, and avoided Hollywood parties. He never married, had no children, and by the 1980s, settled in El Paso, Texas, far from the industry spotlight. Friends and co-stars, including Damon Evans, later suggested that Hemsley was gay and quietly lived with a male partner. He never confirmed or denied the rumors, reflecting both the stigma of his era and his personal preference for solitude. Instead, his passions included progressive rock, jazz, and even recording a little-known R&B album in 1992. His life was an enigma, glimpses of brilliance on screen paired with a silence about who he truly was off it. Sadly, Hemsley's final years were marked by ill health and financial decline. In 2012, he succumbed to lung cancer that caused superior vena cava syndrome, passing away at 74. His death should have been a moment of reverence, yet it sparked chaos. A contested will and the sudden appearance of a man claiming to be his half-brother delayed his burial for nearly 4 months, leaving his body in refrigeration as courts decided his fate. Ultimately, his longtime manager and friend Flora Enchinton was granted control, and Sherman was laid to rest at Fort Bliss National Cemetery in El Paso. Sherman Hemsley's tragic gay life and lonely end stand in stark contrast to the joy he brought millions. His legacy, however, remains untouched. Every rerun of The Jeffersons revives the sharp-tongued George, strutting across living rooms, reminding us that television history was forever changed by the man who dared to move on up even while carrying the weight of secrets he never shared. Norman Lear. Norman Milton Lear, born July 27, 1922 in New Haven, Connecticut, was more than just a producer. He was the architect of modern American television. The son of a traveling salesman who went to prison for fraud, Lear grew up with a deep awareness of injustice and hypocrisy. This sensitivity to social issues would later define his work. After serving as a radio operator and gunner in World War II, he returned to the United States and began a career in public relations before finding his true calling in entertainment. By the 1950s, he was writing for television variety shows, and by the early 1970s, he had become a revolutionary figure in television comedy. Lear believed sitcoms could be more than mindless laughs. They could be a mirror reflecting America's struggles with race, class, politics, and identity. His most famous creation, All in the Family, 1971, introduced audiences to Archie Bunker, a bigoted everyman whose outdated views clashed with a rapidly changing society. The show didn't shy away from taboo topics: racism, feminism, homosexuality, war, and poverty. It forced American families to confront uncomfortable truths, and in doing so, it became a cultural phenomenon. From that single success, Lear spun off a universe of groundbreaking series, including Always Good Times and The Jeffersons. It was on Broadway, however, that Lear discovered a young actor who would change television forever. In the early 1970s, he spotted Sherman Hemsley performing in the Tony Award-winning musical Pearlie. All in the Family, until Hemsley was available. That kind of commitment showed Lear's unmatched instinct for talent. With The Jeffersons, which ran for 11 seasons, Lear helped rewrite how black families were represented on TV, not as sidekicks or caricatures, but as wealthy, independent, and unapologetically outspoken. Norman Lear's influence wasn't limited to television scripts. He was also a passionate activist. In 1981, disturbed by the rise of the moral majority, he founded People for the American Way, a liberal advocacy group committed to defending constitutional freedoms. Through his activism, he continued to challenge conservatism and push for equality, extending the impact of his voice far beyond the living room screen. Lear lived an extraordinarily long life, witnessing nearly a century of American cultural change. He died on December 5, 2023, at the age of 101, leaving behind not just dozens of iconic shows, but a template for how comedy could tackle hard truths. Few producers have ever wielded humor so powerfully, using laughter as a weapon against ignorance. For Sherman Hemsley, Lear was both mentor and gatekeeper, the man who saw in him a spark that others overlooked. Without Lear's vision, George Jefferson might never have existed, and Hemsley might have remained a postal clerk dreaming of a stage. Lear's legacy is therefore tied not just to the shows he created, but to the lives he elevated. His work proved that television could do more than entertain. It could provoke, inspire, and ultimately transform society. Isabel Sanford, Eloise Gwendolyn. Isabel Sanford, born August 29, 1917 in Harlem, New York, carried with her the essence of resilience and quiet determination. The youngest of 7 children, she was raised by a devout Baptist mother who pushed her to pursue her talents despite the economic hardships of the Great Depression. Isabel dreamed of acting, but the path for black women in entertainment during the mid-20th century was filled with obstacles. To support herself, she worked ordinary jobs, raised 3 children after leaving an unhappy marriage, and performed in small theater productions at night. Her tenacity kept her dream alive through years when opportunities seemed scarce. Sanford's breakthrough came when she was cast in A Raisin in the Sun on Broadway, a role that brought her critical acclaim. She later appeared in the 1961 film version alongside Sidney Poitier, Ruby Dee, and Claudia McNeil. This performance signaled her arrival in Hollywood, though it would still take years for her to find the role that defined her. Television producer Norman Lear, always searching for authentic talent, noticed Sanford's natural presence. When developing All in the Family and later The Jeffersons, he cast her as Louise Wheezy Jefferson, the no-nonsense wife who balanced George Jefferson's fiery personality. The chemistry between Sanford and Sherman Hemsley became legendary. George's bluster was offset by Louise's calm wisdom, and audiences quickly embraced the couple as one of TV's most beloved pairings. Their on-screen marriage broke barriers, portraying a successful black couple living in Manhattan's Upper East Side, a rarity on television in the 1970s. Unlike many sitcom wives of that era, Wheezy was no background figure. She challenged George, stood firm in her opinions, and represented dignity and strength in the face of his arrogance. For her portrayal, Sanford made history. In 1981, she won the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series, becoming the first and still one of the few Black women to achieve that honor. Despite her success, she remained grounded, often crediting her children for motivating her to keep going when her career seemed uncertain. While Sherman Hemsley was intensely private, Sanford was more social and outspoken, often attending events and interacting with fans who adored her as Wheezy. After the Jeffersons ended in 1985, Sanford continued to work in television and film, though none of her later roles reached the same iconic status. She reprised Louise Jefferson in guest appearances on shows like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Hangin' with Mr. Cooper, ensuring new generations recognized her as part of television royalty. Off-screen, she was admired for her warmth and grace qualities that mirrored the character she played so well. Isabel Sanford passed away on July 9, 2004, at the age of 86, leaving behind a legacy that extended beyond sitcom laughter. Her portrayal of Wheezy gave audiences a vision of partnership, perseverance, and quiet power. In pairing with Sherman Hemsley, she anchored one of the most groundbreaking sitcoms in American history, proving that representation matters, and that strength often speaks most loudly through gentleness. Marla Gibbs. Marla Gibbs, born Margaret Teresa Bradley, on June 14, 1931 in Chicago, Illinois, exemplifies resilience and perseverance in Hollywood. Raised during the Great Depression, she grew up in a working-class family, later moving to Detroit, where she graduated from high school. Before fame, Marla lived a very different life. She worked as a switchboard operator and later as a United Airlines reservations clerk. Yet even while raising 3 children as a single mother, she nurtured her true dream to act. With determination, she studied drama at night, preparing herself for an opportunity that at the time seemed out of reach for most Black women. Her break came in 1975 when Norman Lear, the producer reshaping American television, cast her in The Jeffersons. Gibbs was chosen to play Florence Johnston, the Jefferson family's sharp-tongued, witty maid. What could have been a stereotypical secondary role was transformed by Gibbs into one of the most iconic sitcom characters in history. With her perfectly timed one-liners, Florence stood toe-to-toe with Sherman Hemsley's George Jefferson, often delivering comebacks that left audiences roaring. Unlike many domestic roles given to Black women in earlier decades, Florence had a voice agency and presence that demanded respect. Marla's brilliance on The Jeffersons did not go unnoticed. She earned 5 Primetime Emmy nominations for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a comedy series, recognition that highlighted her ability to command attention in a show dominated by larger-than-life personalities. But Gibbs wanted more than to be remembered as a maid. In 1985, she produced and starred in 227, a sitcom based on a play about life in a Washington, D.C. apartment building. The series ran for 5 seasons and turned Marla into a lead actress and producer, solidifying her place as one of the few Black women in Hollywood to exercise power behind the camera during that era. Her work went beyond entertainment. Gibbs invested in her community, opening Marla's Memory Lane Jazz and Supper Club in Los Angeles, which became a cultural hub for Black artists. She also ran Crossroads Theater and worked tirelessly to mentor young talent. Unlike Sherman Hemsley, who shunned the spotlight, Gibbs embraced her visibility to uplift others. In later years, Marla remained active in television, appearing in guest roles on shows such as The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Martin Touched by an Angel, and even reprising Florence in special reunions. More recently, she appeared in Scandal and Blackish, introducing herself to new generations of viewers. In 2021, at the age of 90, she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, an honor long overdue. Marla Gibbs's legacy is one of persistence. She entered Hollywood late, defied typecasting, and turned a supporting role into cultural history. While Sherman Hemsley's private struggles cast a shadow on his later years, Gibbs's life stands as an example of how determination, humor, and self-belief can not only change one's own destiny, but also open doors for those who follow. Damon Evans. Damon Evans, born November 24, 1949 in Baltimore, Maryland, built his career as a singer and actor in both theater and television. A classically trained performer, he studied voice at the Boston Conservatory of Music and quickly became known for his tenor range and theatrical versatility. Early in his career, he appeared in musicals and operas, including Lost in the Stars and Hair, establishing himself as a performer who could move between genres with ease. But it was television that brought him into America's living rooms. In 1975, Evans joined the Jeffersons during its second season, stepping into the role of Lionel Jefferson after Mike Evans' no relation departed the series. As the son of George and Louise Jefferson, Lionel represented a younger, forward-thinking generation. While Sherman Hemsley's George was brash and uncompromising, Lionel offered wit, charm, and a level-headedness that appealed to audiences. Damon Evans played the role until 1978, leaving an impression despite his relatively short tenure. His time on the sitcom connected him permanently to Sherman Hemsley's legacy, though their off-screen personalities could not have been more different. Evans was always more open and expressive about his personal life than Hemsley. While Sherman shunned attention and guarded his privacy, Evans later became one of the few co-stars to speak candidly about the rumors surrounding Hemsley's sexuality. In a 2025 interview with The Advocate, Evans stated plainly that Sherman was gay, recalling that they frequented the same clubs and social circles. He even remembered a long-term Puerto Rican boyfriend who attended tapings. Evans admitted that it puzzled him why Sherman felt the need to keep this part of his identity hidden, though he respected the challenges of being a black gay actor in Hollywood at the time. By breaking that silence, Damon Evans highlighted an unspoken truth about the era: being openly gay could ruin a career, especially for a black man starring in a prime-time sitcom. His testimony gave fans context for Hemsley's reclusive lifestyle, helping them understand why the man who embodied George Jefferson on screen might have chosen to retreat into solitude off it. Evans's words reframed Hemsley's story, showing it not as a contradiction, but as a quiet act of survival. Beyond his time on the Jeffersons, Evans continued to perform in musicals, including Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope, and international productions of Porgy and Bess. His stage career reflected his roots as a trained vocalist, though he never again reached the same level of visibility as his sitcom role. Still, his willingness to speak openly about identity and sexuality, both his own and that of his peers, gave him a different kind of cultural significance. Damon Evans's legacy lies in honesty. By pulling back the curtain on Sherman Hemsley's private life, he offered audiences a rare glimpse into the hidden struggles of a sitcom legend. In doing so, he underscored how fame often comes at the cost of authenticity, and how truth once spoken can reshape the way we remember an icon. Jimmy Walker. James Carter. Jimmy Walker, born June 25, 1947 in Brooklyn, New York, rose to fame as one of television's most recognizable comedic figures of the 1970s. Raised in the Bronx by working-class parents, he faced the realities of poverty, first-hand experiences that shaped his sharp humor. After brief work as a radio engineer and stand-up comic, his big break came when Norman Lear cast him as James J.J. Evans on Good Times, 1974 to 1979. With his trademark catchphrase, "Dynamite Walker," became a cultural sensation, a symbol of youthful energy, in a show that blended laughter with the struggles of a black family navigating urban poverty. Though Walker's humor often leaned into broad comedy, he understood the deeper weight of representation on television. Good Times dealt with themes of unemployment, racism, and generational divides, and JJ's exaggerated antics were often a relief in otherwise tense storylines. Yet Walker himself was not simply a clownish figure. Off-screen, he developed a reputation as a reflective, outspoken observer of Hollywood, never afraid to critique the industry or reveal its hidden complexities. It was this candor that later connected him to the conversation about Sherman Hemsley's private life. Walker and Hemsley moved in similar circles as black sitcom stars of the 1970s, while Hemsley retreated from the limelight. Walker often embraced it, continuing stand-up comedy tours, late-night talk show appearances, and public commentary. Decades later, Walker confirmed what had long been whispered about Sherman Hemsley, that he was part of the LGBTQ community. By doing so, Walker joined Damon Evans in breaking the silence that Hemsley himself had maintained until his death. To Walker, acknowledging this truth wasn't about gossip, but about giving recognition to the reality of a colleague who had spent his career hiding in plain sight. Beyond this connection, Jimmy Walker's career had its own highs and lows. After good times, he struggled to escape typecasting as JJ, a fate common to many sitcom actors of his era. He continued to work in television, appearing in shows such as The Love Boat Fantasy Island, and later Everybody Hates Chris, but never recaptured the cultural lightning of the 1970s. Still, his work in stand-up comedy gave him longevity, and his voice remained familiar in radio and commentary, often sparking controversy with his blunt takes on politics and social issues. Walker's place in Sherman Hemsley's story is unique. While they weren't co-stars, Walker's acknowledgement of Hemsley's sexuality helped confirm suspicions that had long surrounded the star of the Jeffersons. It cast Hemsley not as an anomaly, but as part of a generation of black entertainers who had to suppress parts of themselves to maintain careers in a hostile Hollywood system. Flora Enchanton Bernal. When Sherman Hemsley passed away in July 2012, one name suddenly surfaced in headlines across America: Flora Enchanton Bernal. Unlike Hollywood co-stars or distant relatives, Flora was not a public figure. She was his business partner, confidant, and by many accounts the closest person to him in his final decades. To some, she was his caretaker and loyal friend. To others, she became the symbol of the legal chaos that tarnished what should have been a peaceful farewell for a beloved sitcom star. Flora first entered Hemsley's life in the late 1980s, long after his television fame had peaked. By then, he had retreated from Hollywood to live quietly in El Paso, Texas. While Sherman avoided the spotlight, Flora helped manage his affairs and provided companionship in his reclusive years. In interviews after his death, she described herself as his partner in life, though not romantically. She insisted their relationship was rooted in friendship, loyalty, and shared trust. To her, Sherman was not George Jefferson or Deacon Fry. He was a gentle private man who valued peace above all else. That trust was made official in June 2012, when Sherman signed a will naming Flora as the sole beneficiary of his estate. Just 6 weeks later, he succumbed to lung cancer at the age of 74. Almost immediately, controversy erupted. A man named Richard Thornton appeared, claiming to be Sherman's half-brother and challenging the will's validity. The dispute grew ugly, with allegations that Sherman had been coerced or that Flora was taking advantage of his illness. As the battle dragged on, the consequences were grim. For nearly 4 months, Sherman's body remained in refrigeration unburied as lawyers fought over his final wishes. It was a deeply undignified fate for a man who had brought joy to millions. Throughout the ordeal, Flora maintained that she had been by Sherman's side for over 20 years, caring for him and respecting his desire for privacy. She argued that he had no close ties to family back in Philadelphia and that she was the only person he truly trusted to handle his affairs. In November 2012, Judge Patricia B. Chu ruled in her favor, validating the will and confirming Sherman's mental capacity at the time it was signed. Nurses, attorneys, and even a U.S. Marshal testified that Sherman was of sound mind and had clearly intended for Flora to be his heir. With the court's ruling, she was finally able to arrange his burial at Fort Bliss National Cemetery in El Paso, where around 150 mourners attended. During the service, Flora symbolically released a white dove, saying, "Just set him free. Let him be. Let him explore the universe." Her role in Sherman Hemsley's story remains polarizing. Some see her as a loyal friend who honored his wishes when no one else was there. Others view her as a shadowy figure who emerged only in his final years. Regardless, Flora Enchinton Bernal's name is forever tied to the tragic end of a sitcom legend, standing at the crossroads of loyalty, secrecy, and controversy. Richard Thornton. When Sherman Hemsley passed away in July 2012, fans expected tributes and celebration of his groundbreaking television career. Instead, the actor's death spiraled into controversy, and at the center of it was a man few had ever heard of, Richard Thornton, who stepped forward claiming to be Hemsley's half-brother. His sudden appearance in El Paso courts ignited a legal fight that left Sherman's body unburied for nearly 4 months and cast a shadow over the beloved star's final chapter. Thornton, who lived in Philadelphia, argued that Sherman had been manipulated in his final days. 6 weeks before his death, the reclusive actor signed a will naming his longtime friend and manager, Flora Enchinton Bernal, as his sole heir. To Thornton, the timing looked suspicious. He insisted that Hemsley was in no condition to make such decisions and questioned whether Flora's influence had been too strong. By contesting the will, he not only sought a share of the estate, but also control over Sherman's burial arrangements. The battle became a tabloid spectacle. Headlines focused less on Sherman's iconic television legacy and more on the grim reality of his body being kept in refrigeration while lawyers debated his final wishes. Fans who adored George Jefferson were horrified at the indignity. Thornton maintained that as blood family, he should have the legal right to decide how his brother was remembered, even though he and Sherman had reportedly been estranged for decades. In court, Thornton's claims were rigorously tested. Witnesses testified that Sherman had been lucid when signing his will. A nurse confirmed he was oriented and coherent, while a lawyer who oversaw the document vouched for its authenticity. Even a U.S. Marshal, Robert Almonte, told the court that Sherman considered Flora his only family and had no desire to reconnect with Philadelphia relatives. These testimonies undermined Thornton's case, painting a picture of a man trying to intervene at the last moment. Judge Patricia B. Chu ultimately ruled in favor of Flora Enchinton Bernal, declaring Sherman's will valid. The ruling allowed Flora to finally bury her longtime companion on November 21, 2012, at Fort Bliss National Cemetery in El Paso. Thornton's challenge had failed, but not before it delayed Sherman's burial for 118 days, leaving fans with bitter memories of the chaos that surrounded his passing. For some, Thornton was seen as an opportunist, a distant relative chasing the estate of a famous man. For others, he was simply a family member demanding answers about a brother who had lived his life in secrecy. Whatever the interpretation, his involvement turned Sherman Hemsley's final chapter into one of the most disturbing celebrity estate battles in recent history. In the end, Richard Thornton became an unwelcome footnote in the legacy of a man who had entertained millions. His fight for control may have been unsuccessful, but it ensured that Sherman Hemsley's tragic gay life and lonely end were forever entwined with courtroom drama, suspicion, and family conflict. Mara Gibbs. Sherman Hemsley's story remains one of brilliance shadowed by mystery. He made America laugh for decades as George Jefferson. Yet his private life, whispered truths, and chaotic farewell revealed the painful cost of fame. Was he a man protecting his peace, or a star forced into silence by an unforgiving Hollywood? His legacy proves that laughter can hide heartbreak and that icons carry burdens we may never fully know. Do you think Sherman's silence was a choice of strength or a tragedy of circumstance? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more untold stories.